who likes to hear and likes to learn, join us and even be able to watch it after the fact. Moving on, I'd like to do a quick land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the land in which we gather has been and is still the traditional territory of several indigenous nations, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Since time immemorial, numerous indigenous nations and indigenous people have lived and passed through this territory. We recognize that this territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty and the Two Row Wampum Treaty, which emphasizes the importance of joint stewardship, peace, and respectful relationships. Sheridan affirms that it is our collective responsibility to honor and respect those who have gone before us, those who are here, and those who have yet to come. And we're grateful for the opportunity to be working and living on this land. So quickly, a Zoom orientation for everybody who is joining us in the session. You're going to meet the team, myself. My name is Cole Arnett. I'm the Client Experience Intern at Edge. Happy to be here. Happy to help host the session along with Daniel Francavilla, who will be our mentor for today. Using the session and joining in on the chat, by all means, please type in the chat during the session to ask any questions you might have as Daniel is going to be presenting. And when it opens up for Q&A later on in the session, feel free to unmute yourself and participate in conversation. We'd like to really have some good Q&A happening. When we are on, we encourage you to show your video like some of the people here today. Great to see your faces, happy to have you guys here, but not completely necessary if you aren't necessarily comfortable with it. Moving on, some introductions. We welcome you to introduce yourselves in the chat, maybe tell us who you are, your organization or where you're from, and what you do, so that we can kind of set up and have everybody in the room know who's here and who's with us. For anybody who does not know Edge, we are Sheridan's entrepreneurship hub, which focuses on connecting individuals and empowering those who want to make a sustainable difference and pursue entrepreneurship. We have 4 levels of programming, all the way from Explore to Soar, which follow idea generation and learning about entrepreneurship, all the way to revenue generation, venture growth, and having a sustainable product that works on the market and is sold or shown to many people across the world. Mentor Monday outcomes. We're looking to support the community, engage each of you with mentors within our network, and learn about some great topics. And we're hoping to create a little bit of a strong bond between Edge and our community. The mentor for today, without further ado, is Daniel Francavilla, the Marketing and Communications Manager at Edge, but so much more with many other projects that he's participated with us on for time. I will now open it up to Daniel so that he can participate in and show us what's happening today. All right, Daniel. Can't hear ya. Can anybody hear Daniel? No. I see that you are unmuted, which is fine, but looks like for some reason the audio device is not working. So we'll give it a shot. Yeah, figure it out. We'll figure out the tech. Might have to change your input. And he'll pop back in soon enough. I've thought of trying to integrate some moments of sharing during these sessions to have music playing in the background. So we'll see if I can even manage that in the meantime.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right.
Perfect. I'll give you sharing capabilities again. Just give me a moment. All right, the floor is yours, Daniel.
Perfect. Yeah, I should have tested it that whole time. I was just sitting there. But thanks everyone for coming tonight. I'm pretty excited to talk a little bit more about branding and how it relates, of course, to how it ties in with content and social and growing your startup. So I'm gonna just pull up my presentation here, which is ready to go. It's very Edge colors. Can you see the slides? Okay, awesome. So this is me, of course. I just wanted to give you a quick background. So I started my agency, Now Creative Group, back when about a year or so after graduating, year and a half after graduating from OCAD University, where I studied graphic design. But having a background in nonprofit in the Peel region, I grew up in Brampton, did a lot of work with nonprofits, and that's kind of how I got into this kind of bridge these two worlds together of wanting to make some kind of impact and using design and creativity to kind of merge those two things together. And so I started this nonprofit. I won't go into those details. I evolved from graphic design into digital communications and marketing and social and everything in between, and now focus on branding and marketing here at Edge, which I just joined the team this fall. So super excited to have all these worlds kind of come together. The agency, Now Creative Group, we focus on mostly branding. My team, again, works with people ranging from startups to large enterprises. I'll show you some examples today throughout the presentation. And what we really try to do is help tell a brand story, whether it's a nonprofit or a company or an individual entrepreneur. So starting off with, of course, the very basics about what is a brand. Your brand is your promise. That's definitely one way to summarize it. It's what you're promising to the public, to your staff, to your partners, to your team. So what does that actually look like? Well, people often think of just a logo when they think of their brand. And obviously, this diagram is just to show you that the logo is just the tip of the iceberg, to borrow that phrase. And of course, you do have some of your key messages and things like that, but there's so much more behind that brand, and we're going to go into a little bit of that. But the reason I'm showing you this diagram is because in order to just establish what your actual messaging will look like, what your content will look like, it's really helpful to kind of have this background information. Now, the next section of my presentation is focused a lot on kind of the recent changes over the last 6 months or so with the pandemic and all the other movements that have been happening and the politics, and there's just been a lot going on in the world. So a lot of brands and companies have actually kind of had moments where they completely paused, or they didn't know what to do or what to post. So again, you may already be well versed in this, but I just want to kind of remind everyone of these things, that authenticity is more important than ever. That's why it's important to look at what your brand stands for. If you do have those values set, you're going to be less likely to avoid jumping on bandwagons, jumping on a hashtag real quick, posting something that everyone's asking you to share without knowing kind of how that aligns and fits in with your brand. Acknowledging that you don't have all the answers is great. Depending on the kind of business you run now, there's a ridiculous frequency of changes when it comes to the policies and the rules about even how your business may be allowed to open or function, right? So acknowledge that, and be personal is what I would recommend for certain, even large companies. Show a little bit of personality, because empathy and transparency are what people need right now. So oftentimes when the word community is thrown around, people think of their local community, like where they live. But community includes a lot more. It's your actual buyers, right? Your customers, who follows you online. Some of them can be customers, some of them may not be. It is your local community, but it's also charities, nonprofits, and community partners, and your peers that kind of all help form a network. So when you're trying to come up with your content and your messaging, it's important not to just think of the buyer as that one persona, but who are all these other people in your network that you would be communicating with. So this thing here, obviously creating valuable and timely content, it is difficult if you're an entrepreneur juggling every other side of the business. But when you do get to focus on this, what I like to remind people is that we're not expecting every business to be a subject matter expert on every topic that comes up, right? We want, as a customer, you want them to emphasize their expertise in the area that they are most knowledgeable in. So that's why I say to emphasize your expertise in times where you might not know what to say. Maybe you're closed, maybe you're out of stock, maybe you're having issues because of the pandemic. Just reminding people that you're there, offering to help, or offering any other kind of special accommodations, really important. And if all else fails, focusing on what I call evergreen content, which basically just means content that you can build now that can be used at any point in time, right? So whether it's tutorials, or whether it's articles about the industry, or whether it's data, stats, whatever that is, building evergreen content is an awesome way to just have something that you can share and you can post. All right, so this next thing is obviously pretty important, especially during times of frequent change that the world is going through right now. So tracking trends and measuring results. So look at what's working for your business, but also one thing I recommend is check out other peers and go to their Facebook pages, go to their Instagram accounts, see what is in the comments. What are people saying? How are they reacting? And of course, I'm talking about larger brands or influencers that you can look into and leverage to really understand, like, what are the people saying? Are they complaining about? Are they liking it? And that may give you basically free market research to see what's something you might want to actually adopt to your brand. And then of course, you can start to, for those businesses that weren't always online 100%, you can start to figure out ways where you can make this, it's the new normal, as everyone says. And again, if you still haven't jumped on the bandwagon when it comes to paid social, whether you've run ad campaigns or just one-off boosted posts, at least during the start of the pandemic, which is obviously several months ago now, there was an amazing opportunity to be able to purchase ads and at a even lower risk, because just based on how the inventory was working and what other advertisers were doing, there's a much cheaper opportunity on paid display ads and search ads as well. And yes, this quote here, great brands build their equity in crisis like these. So again, if you have a chance to not be in survival mode or reaction mode, it is a good time to kind of build what you stand for and what you become the go-to company for. So there is the visual aspect of branding, and I did want to show this little mini case study here on a space that I had the opportunity to consult on and brand in Toronto, because I want to show kind of the background of what goes into building your brand. And obviously, you're going to have a lot of research, and you're going to do market research. And if you have a business plan, you're going to definitely have some numbers there. But this here is kind of research on the landscape, on the ecosystem. So it's both from a visual perspective as well as from a naming perspective, and just to see where things are at. So obviously, looking at the landscape is a big part of that visual identity process. When you start with a logo design, you're going to have a really wide range to probably work with. And from there, you're going to notice certain things about different brand elements that you want to keep. For example, different shapes have different meanings. They might, some might appear more structural, more confident, more approachable. And we always start designing in black and white, because the color, you don't necessarily want that to influence or distract from your design just yet, because of course people have different preferences for colors, and colors have different meanings as well. So with this visual identity design, we looked at obviously the text elements and then the visual elements. One thing to look at is, it's so easy to use a logo generator or to go on Canva, for example, but when you're really thinking about it, like a brand that you want to last and grow, what are those custom elements? So for example, the logo on the left, the corner of the building, they own the whole building. So the corner of the building at the intersection was that shape. So that was just one thing that we kind of used as like a custom design element to to tie that together. We also played around with, like, when you're having a brand, you might have different sub brands, for example, right? So if you're launching an event series, or if you're launching a product, or if you're doing a partnership, what will these things look like, and see how you can kind of fit those elements in together. So in the end, this was the final concept that we went with, which kind of represented the idea of a pyramid, but also a little bit more fluid and organic, because startups are never super rigid and solid, right? Like a pyramid, but they do obviously want to have the credibility and the structure. The company who actually opened this space, this entrepreneurship space, was a developer. They build, houses, condos, and things like that. So the pyramid was like a nod to that kind of construction aspect as well. Then finally came into the colors, and we developed the color scheme. Each of those would then eventually be affiliated with different parts of the business and of the space. So this was kind of how the visual identity was applied to the space. So as you can see on the windows, there's some graphics. The logo was able to be used as a design element, and not just a logo, not just a symbol, right? So we were able to kind of use the shapes elsewhere as well. And the color was able to be used, of course, in the paint in the physical space, carried over through your website. Again, it's pretty obvious, but when it comes to branding, it's so important to be consistent, because a lot of times you go to a great Instagram account and you might click on the link and the website is a total disconnect. And when that happens, you actually lose people's trust. Sometimes they think they're in the wrong place, right? So you want to be able to create that consistency. So part of the strategy with this space was, of course, the community building side. So coming up with different events, different series. And this was what our content for social looked like. And one of the things I wanted to show you here was that there's a wide range of posts, styles and types here, but collectively they all form some kind of unity. You can tell they're from the same place when you look at this as a feed. There's some repetition, there's some consistency with colors, with shapes, with the photo edits. So like we'll always use the same filter, for example. This was really important, especially for a new brand, to show people kind of this is what you can expect. And again, you don't have to post the same exact template, same exact style for every single post. This one I'll skip. So, all right, so TELUS is an example I wanted to show, because obviously they're a massive corporation, but they created a sub-brand, I guess you could call it, or a campaign called Stand With Owners, specifically during the pandemic. So I'm going to show you a couple of other examples later, but with regards to this example here, it's about having a content strategy that you can actually execute. And at the time, celebrity, or famous entrepreneurs like Arlene Dickinson from Dragon's Den, she's not going to be flying around the country doing interviews and videos and going to studios, right? So the solution here was to find a way to incorporate that content into something that still looks like it's from TELUS, still looks like it's from the campaign, and matches the style. So there's a number of things you can do to kind of edit your videos and your content to make them look like they're coming from the same source. And also, one thing to add too is this content is clearly not salesy, right? They're not selling you a phone here at all. They're literally providing value to the audience. And that's one thing to look at as well. As an entrepreneur, it's very easy to tell people to sign up for my app or buy my product or sign up for my event, but you need to provide value to people as well before just kind of asking them for stuff, right? This next example is a startup that I had the chance to work on and partner with when a filter company, they sell air filters like that you put in your furnace or your car. They decided to do something, they wanted to do something to help early on. So we came up with this mask brand for them. And again, they weren't marketers, they're experts at the product itself. So they developed a mask that could be used with replaceable filters, super high quality filters, and brought it to market extremely quickly. And the reason I'm showing this example here is because we had zero mask to work with. We had no photos, no product, yet we were still able to start putting out content on social, right? So, I developed a graphic style, developed a color scheme. I wanted to even show like some of these are curated photos that we maybe change the colors on, right? So we had nothing, right? We had nothing to start with. And we were able to express the brand values and the information about the product early on. And then today, after, of course, several months of product development and marketing and even a new edition of the mask, we are able to integrate the photos and the graphics and kind of still create this overall consistency with the brand. And I guess from this perspective, we have a balance, right? We have informational posts, because again, it's healthcare. People need to know the facts, the science. Stuff is constantly changing. The latest post in the top left there is literally a term or material that was used in the media recently. And so the idea was, let's define what this term is. Where is it found? Why are people Googling it right now? And what is the benefit, right? And so this is because the government of Canada came out with a statement that said you need to have 3-layer masks, including a filter layer using a filter material such as this. And so because Maskell already had the branding ready, the messaging ready, the education there, it is very easy to jump on those new announcements as they continue to come out. So again, that's just an example, and all of these photos were submitted. We didn't actually do a photo shoot at all. And so there are a lot of ways to kind of get content and create content, even when it is, a pandemic and offices and everything is closed. So just taking a step back to, again, what does it look like for your content strategy and how does your brand apply to that? One of the quotes that I love using is this one here. Our rallying cry right now is this: retention is the new acquisition and helping is the new selling. Why that's relevant now is because it's so important to invest time in keeping your followers, keeping your customers, as opposed to, and kind of building that loyalty, as opposed to just constantly looking, diverting your resources, spending money and time on people that may not be the best fit. If you have a core audience that you want to serve them, and you can serve them, it's a really great way to strengthen their relationship with them during this time. And helping is the new selling is really about putting out valuable content that I mentioned before. That's not sales specific content. One of the startups, they're based out of Toronto. I had the chance to work with them a while back. It's called Reframe. So what these guys did during the pandemic is they put out a social media guide. Now, it's not the greatest design, obviously. It was, probably something they threw together very quickly, but they saw a need. Then they offered it for free, got email addresses, got thousands of email addresses to download this free guide that had a bunch of tips that their team put together. And of course, now they have the chance to market to those people, but they did it in the spirit of, hey, we want to help small businesses, right? The next option you see on the right is they literally opened up this page to offer their product for free, the premium version for 6 weeks. And of course, after the 45 days, you can talk to them, but you also got like a free strategy guide and a walkthrough and all of this. They onboarded so many people that they totally blew over their quota. To put this together was extremely simple. They literally put what is that form? One of those websites, type form. They put a type form together, and that's it, right? And of course, it started getting shared a lot more from the community because you have something free to offer. So the message here is, yes, do something to help, but also if there is any free offers that you can come up with, it's a great way to market on your own to get people through the door that you can then keep in your community and potentially work with later on as well. This example here is for a company called Perksy in the States. And I wanted to show this example because yes, it's pandemic marketing. This came out in April, this newsletter, but also the style and the tone of their communication. So they have literally 4 emoji in their email subject line, right? The actual content is talking, their product is that they sell research and data and quizzes and stuff that they do for millennials and Gen Z. So the reason that this is relevant is because guess what? They want you to know that they're experts with Gen Z and millennials. So they want the content of their newsletter to be that same type of language and vibe. And what's super important about that is, again, they're sending out timely insights. It's free, but they're also reinforcing their brand as they do that. They don't even really mention their brand name anywhere in their emails. It's just, hey, here's some research, here's some helpful stats. And of course, people will then go think of them as the go-to brand when they do need something. The brand here is called Perksy. It's actually started by a Canadian who currently is in New York building the company. Next one here is, again, coming up with a free product or a free version of your product. So Vidyard, they're a Canadian company based in Kitchener-Waterloo. They were planning an internal communications tool that was going to be a paid offering. But again, the way the world was changing, they decided to make it free and available. And by doing this, of course, they were able to kind of create a free version and get a ton of traction and people using their product. And of course, they're helping out the community and startups that could really benefit from it as well. So always showing that value if you can. I'm not saying, go spend tons and tons of time and money developing a whole separate free product, but if it's a version or if you're already working on something, this is an interesting approach. All right. So again, looking at how you can adjust your current marketing to the need of the day that comes up. The post on the left is tell us business. So when I had my team at the agency, we were approached to come up with a way to highlight an existing product that they already had, some tools that help you work from home, right? Just at the time when everyone realized, like, okay, we are going to be working remotely for a while now. So we came out with some content, and Tell Us Business was able to push that through. Again, just highlighting existing resources, existing tools that you already have, bringing them to the forefront at the right time. Because really, with social media, it's always going to be about timing as well, right? As part of the Stand With Owners campaign, I told you already about the interviews, but another really cool thing they did was went around to different business owners and interviewed them and told their story so that they could help other founders who are going through a really difficult time. And this was one of my favorite things. You may or may not have heard of it. They did a pretty large campaign, but it was over in 4 days because it sold out basically. So they decided they're gonna give away $500,000 to support small businesses. And all you had to do was basically tag them and tweet them, and you can get a $25 gift card to give out to any small business of your choice. So they will literally buy you a gift card for a small business. They could have just written a check for $500,000 and donated it somewhere, but instead they used it for this amazing campaign where businesses felt supported and a lot of people grew, and clearly in 4 days it sold out across Canada. So this was a cool thing. I put it in as an example because of how relevant and timely it was. And then this example here from Tim Hortons, I didn't actually see any of these. I'm sure a lot of people didn't because we were at home, not at Tim Hortons. But for so many people who were deemed essential workers at the time, they created these hero cups, and they had names of 100 essential workers on them. And of course, their name, their brand is so recognizable that the cup barely even has to say Tim Hortons because they're writing thank you in a similar font and style as Tim Hortons. And it's an awesome way to leverage the real estate they had and the brand to show the support for their community. Again, with the timely stuff is that I wanted to say that you can be pretty quick at reacting to stuff. So for example, when Toronto announced their rules about COVID, this graphic was created within a day and put up. The middle graphic here is when masks were first introduced into public transit on the TTC. So this one I wanted to show as an example. You can tell that it's the same style, but it doesn't say anything about a mask, and it doesn't ask you to do anything, right? It's not selling you something. So this content is the type of content that gets more engagement or shares, because people they don't feel like they're being sold to. And this is something that, again, it's just a friendly message about staying safe. But of course, the caption explains that, hey, because masks are now mandatory on the TTC, we are now recommending them. This is what we suggest you do, and here's a discount offer because for riders of TTC, we want to do this, right? The other major thing, and this is where, of course, at Edge, focusing a lot on impact entrepreneurship, social enterprises. This week is Social Enterprise Days coming up on Thursday. So one of the important things is tying a cause to your startup if you can. This is obviously huge because it does help your brand itself. It also makes your customers feel more confident in their decision. So from day one with Maskwell, I made a connection with this nonprofit called the Homefront. They're not actually, they weren't running before the pandemic, but they are like a collective where they have a number of different causes that they're supporting. Frontline workers, PPE, shelters, all that kind of stuff. They're acting as a central source. So from day one, we included in all the marketing and all the packaging that percentage of the sales, not of the profits, of the actual sales, would go towards this organization. That kind of gives, of course, it's a quick way to actually have a positive impact. You're not waiting until you make profit and sell the company. You're actually including it in every single purchase. And also it assures your buyers that it's a good choice. And then the other one here is Black Owned Toronto. So this was actually a Facebook group, an Instagram account that started from 0 followers, by this one individual in Toronto, and it ended up growing to tens and tens of thousands of followers. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to provide a bunch of masks for business owners. So again, and looking at a way to get your product in the right place is you can sponsor things, you can do giveaways. So we gave away masks to a number of Black-owned businesses in Toronto, and it was an awesome way to showcase and highlight those businesses as well. All while, of course, promoting the fact that you should wear a mask. So I'm going to give just 2 or 3 more examples here, and then I'm happy to discuss anything more or take any questions. I want to give this example of Snap Travel. So with their Instagram account, most of their content is actually curated. They're not sending photographers around the world to take these photos. And if you notice in their bio, they have this Snap Your Travel hashtag for a chance to get featured. So what Snap Travel is it's literally a platform where you can text or use Facebook Messenger to basically book a hotel, right? Book accommodation, or travel. So they're invested by someone very famous, Steph Curry of the NBA. So that's right in their Instagram bio. They definitely are proud of that. They're based in Toronto, and their Instagram account is super simple. It's literally just these travel photos, right? But they're building a following. They have a verified account. And then also I wanted to mention the small thing on Instagram is, of course, you can have your story highlights. They're using that as a way that you can learn more about their company without having to leave Instagram. You don't have to go to the website. You don't have to look them up. On the right here, I included this example. Back in March, which is literally when the first lockdown started, when everything kind of got turned upside down, they made a statement proactively, before they knew thousands of people would reach out about canceled trips. And they said, listen, we're updating our policy. Here's what you need to know about canceling travel. It had, 1,600 comments. Obviously, a lot of people were concerned and engaged in it, but they just were transparent and they went with it. So that's, again, it really shows what kind of brand or what kind of startup you are by how you respond in crisis like these. Another one, which has nothing to do with COVID, thankfully, is this cool brand here called Air Company. They're a vodka brand in the States. So I showed this example from a branding perspective. Their actual brand, like their logo, isn't actually anywhere on their posts, but the simplicity of the typography style and the spacing, you can kind of tell that it's all from the same place, right? So that's another element of how to do that. What's really cool about this, their content, is they're using their platform on Instagram just to educate people about actual issues that they care about. And the environment's obviously one of them, right? So what they did is, these slider posts here, they're providing actual information in long form format as a caption, and they're providing certain questions, facts and stats like that as well, integrated with their product shot. So as you can see, it's a fairly good balance between, buy our alcohol versus we also care about these issues, right? So that's just one example that's kind of doing it in a very tasteful way. And then On Men is actually a client that I had the chance to work on, where they were a brand new startup to only launching in Ontario at the beginning, which again, I think they're expanding to one other province, but they didn't have any real product photos or anything. So again, most of this was educational stuff. What are the issues, different men's health issues? They have different treatments, medicine, therapies, things like that. And it's also a unique model because, again, in Canada, you need a prescription, of course. The timing was perfect for them because when everything shut down, people didn't want to voluntarily go to the doctor and put themselves at risk. So they literally, that's their business. They do virtual. You book an appointment, you have a virtual doctor appointment, you get your prescription, and it arrives within 24 hours sometimes. So this was just a brand where, again, in order to do the product shots, what they did was they literally sent our photographer the products, and it was all set up at home because that's the experience that all their customers are going to have too. So this content here, it's a combination of educational stuff with real people. So every week or so, they have one of their doctors actually come on and give that trustworthy, relatable, where you can see the face behind the company. Because when it's healthcare, especially, you need to build that trust with your audience. I'm going to touch on a couple of recommended tools as the last section here. So this is called the Brand Soul Canvas, which was actually developed by one of my team members. And I'm going to talk a lot more about this actually on Thursday at the conference on Social Enterprise Day. I'm going to be doing a whole workshop on it. But I just wanted to explain that, when you are looking at what do I actually put in my brand? What does my marketing look like? Taking a step back and filling something out like this really, really helps. And so, asking questions like, why do we exist? Where's my startup going? Who are the real people that I actually want to reach? Like, yes, there'll be other people that buy, but who are my core people? And then you decide to speak to them. This tool here, so I talked a lot about creating original content, but a lot of times you need content to inform people, to keep people up to date. And it's realistically, you can't come up with everything from scratch. So this is a tool called BuzzSumo that I recommend using to find content that is relevant and is performing well elsewhere. So for example, right now, if I want to share an article about, let's say, remote work. I want to find an article about remote work because that's something that my audience is interested in. I would search remote work, and I would see all the articles that have been shared on various platforms and how they did, like literally engagement metrics and comments and shares. So that's how you know that that article may potentially do well with your audience. And so it gives you a way to curate all of these amazing resources. And of course, there's all kinds of other, paid features and stuff like that. But it's a great way to do that. This other one here, if you haven't even started your business yet, or if you're looking for a better name, Shopify has a domain name generator tool that will kind of help you find something that makes sense and something that may be SEO friendly. There's also this check username tool that I recommend. It's just checkuser.org. If you are setting up a new startup or business, nonprofit, it's so important that your usernames are consistent everywhere, because that helps with your SEO, and that encourages the likelihood, of course, that people are actually going to tag you without struggling to figure out what your username is on those platforms, right? You don't want to lose people for something like that. So if you go to that website, you can type in different combinations of your name and of words, and helps you find out on all these platforms what happens to be available for you. And then this very, very important tool, because you can't manage it all yourself. Even if you have a social media manager full-time, having a tool such as Hootsuite or Buffer is really, really important to keep your content organized. I've used both. I prefer Buffer. There's a lot of different features on Buffer, but what it really does is ultimately helps you schedule out your content on all different platforms: Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook pages, all at once. And so I definitely don't recommend just hitting post and kind of blasting out your content everywhere. You do want to customize it per network. But what you can start to do is you can say, okay, on LinkedIn, people are more active on my content in the mornings. So I'm going to set my time on Mondays at 8 a.m. And then you just add stuff to your queue. You just keep adding content, Maybe some of it's from BuzzSumo. Maybe some of it's your own graphics. Maybe some of it are just things you type in and ideas you have. And all of that stuff gets scheduled onto your queue on Buffer. And if something urgent comes up, like there's a major announcement, great. You can just go in and put that to the top of your queue. And so you still will always have content planned out. And this is super important because you're going to be busy running your actual business. You're not going to be a full-time social media manager. And so a tool like this will help you keep track of all that as well. And then of course there's built-in analytics. So instead of logging into every single site to see your analytics, you can log in here. One thing I will add about social scheduling is you definitely don't have to be active on every single platform. You have to look at where your audience is, right? Like, where are those key demographics actually existing? And with that, I will stop talking for a second. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Perfect, Daniel, thank you. Do you mind pulling down your screen so we can see everybody?
Yes. Yeah, there's my contact info as well. Let me stop sharing. Is it gone?
Go right up to the top in the middle.
There we go.
There you go. All right. So thank you, Daniel. That was great. That was awesome. Generally, this is the point at which we open the floor for any questions. If anybody has a burning question they'd like to ask right away, by all means, go right for it. Otherwise, we have a couple of questions that people submitted prior to the session during the sign up in the Eventbrite. Feel free to ask questions in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask questions directly to Daniel. Either way is completely fine.
Hey, Daniel. My name is Sean. So wondering if you've encountered clients who are debating between going naming their business after themselves versus a company name. And if you can share any insight, obviously my question speaks to me, and it's something that I'm once again struggling with. So I'm just curious to know what you have experienced.
Yes. Yeah, no problem, Sean. So there's a few factors here. Number one is that kind of rules things out is if there's too many Sean O'Keefe's out there. So if you're not Googleable, if they can't easily kind of find you from that, that's one factor, right? Or if your name is a little bit more complicated to spell, then again, it's going to work to your disadvantage. Not to say don't use it at all, but those are the two immediate things. The second thing is that if you plan to grow a team where you have multiple associates or partners in the near future, and you think that could potentially be a challenge. Sometimes it is. There are, of course, massive companies that are named after one person, right? But sometimes it's difficult if you're going to bring on a partner or a staff, and the company is just your name, right? So that's the other factor. And then the third is just from an industry standpoint, sometimes it's better to have a name that has some type of meaning. For example, by your name, I don't necessarily know what industry you're in, what your expertise is. Not to say that you can't build that reputation in that industry. And of course, maybe I'll Google you and I'll find something out right now, right? But it makes it less obvious from that perspective. So those would be kind of my three main things. For people who aren't sure, what I do often recommend is that if you can build two different platforms, it's double the amount of ways that people can find you, right? So for example, as Sean, you can do events, you can have a blog, you can do whatever content you want to create, in addition to the marketing that your company is doing, and both can lead to the same place in the end, which is people hopefully becoming clients. But you kind of have two ways to promote that. So those would be my insights. I don't know do you want to share more about your business?
Sure. So the easiest way to describe it is it's a transitional life coaching or life coaching for middle-aged folks, people who have come to.
Yes.
Sorry, go on.
Not to cut you off, but I was just going to say, because you said coach, a lot of times with any type of coach, whether it's business, health, or life coaching, the name itself is super important, because it's like a doctor, right? The doctor only goes by the doctor's name, right? But I have seen some successful brands that the brand name that you would want to choose would be something very aspirational, right? Where it's something very positive, aspirational that people want to get to, and of course you're the coach that can help them get there, right? So it's really about choosing a name that you think people can resonate at that point. And also, if you do plan on offering any other types of things, that might be a product, a book, a workshop, anything else that you can package that's not just you, then you would do that under that brand name, right? As opposed to your personal name as well.
Because the name that I'm operating under now is Springboard.
Okay.
And the struggle that I have is Springboard by Sean O'Keefe or Sean O'Keefe's Springboard. And there's a lot of mixed emotion tied in.
Right. I'm Googling it right now. Yeah. Okay.
It's actually springboardpa.com.
Springboard Personal Accelerator. So that's really cool. I like the descriptive element to the name. Like that to me sounds like I want to know what this is. That might just be me personally, but I'm definitely intrigued by that because I haven't heard of a personal accelerator. So personally, I think this is good. But just right off the bat, my initial feedback is that I don't think of it as a coach, right? I think of it as an app maybe, or a tool, right? So just with the name and the logo that I'm seeing now. Of course, when I go to the website, it says the man you want to be is just one click away. So it's like it's focused on you. It says by Sean O'Keefe. So I can see where you're on the fence with that. Yeah, but
Okay.
but I do think Springboard is a great name. I will say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for your input.
Yeah, no problem.
We have a question from Erica in the chat. What brand touch points would you say are the most important? Now, Erica, do you wanna build upon that, or?
Sure. I guess like I know like I have this book called Designing Brand Identity, and it's actually a really cool book if you guys want to dive deeper into branding. But I know like for example, like your email signature is considered a brand point or a touch point, or like your I know like business cards. I don't know if those are still going to be very useful, but I'm just curious like now that with the world is so much more digital, is like maybe is print dead, or is like what are the more I guess like important touch points now that most things are digital?
Yeah, for sure. So it's great. By the way, I think I have that exact book. I forget the author's name, but I'm 90% sure I have that book. So yeah, so when it comes to touch points, you're obviously right about it being digital first, whereas before you would find out about you might find out about a company through a conference or an event, or you might see a storefront or an office, and so then you're going to go look it up and match that online. So with the digital first approach, you need to have that's where the visual part comes in, because as you know, there's a million players. Every social media network is completely crowded with content, whether it's people or brands that are competing for your space. So if you have an identifiable color, icon, symbol that you're using everywhere in all of your assets, all of your graphics, your website, that's what's going to help you to grow that kind of visual, those visual assets for your brand touch points. A newsletter, it never really comes up when people are talking about marketing and social and content, but an email newsletter is one of the strongest brand touch points you can have, because it's personal. It's coming into your actual email. And when they have that email, it has your name, it has your company name, it probably has the avatar, like the logo from your email. So that I think is one of the most powerful brand touch points, because again, people have that direct personal connection with it, and they see it often in their inbox too. So that's one that I think is kind of like underrated. Another would be, of course, something that a lot of influencers and stuff are doing, which is the texting situation, where you can sign up for a service where people can text the number and then they can become a subscriber on your text. It's not necessarily good for every brand or organization, but it does kind of build that personal touch point. And no matter where you are, people feel connected to that brand and that content creator. So yeah, I think those are just a couple more brand touch points beyond like your social media profile. Yes, that is the book, Cole. I have an older version of the cover, but yes, that is the book.
I think this is the 2017 revision, the 15th edition.
Yes.
I have another question about brand colors. So I don't want to get too much into color theory, because I know like there's like blue signifies, I don't know, like I actually don't know, I'm probably lying to you, but like blue is like stability and like comfort, and like red is strength and stuff like that. But I guess when you're designing like you're coming up with your maybe secondary colors, like how much of that is still like important, like considering color theory, or do you just really go what complements your primary colors?
Yeah. So if your colors are going to represent actual sub brands or programs, then they still need to have some kind of logic to what they represent, right? So if it's like if one of the sub brands is a fun and exciting event series, then you're going to want the color to match with that. But ultimately, when actual when designers and brand identity designers, it's going to be specifically colors that that fit well in the color scheme, right? Because the last thing you want is a color that was chosen because it had a great meaning, but then it clashes with the rest of the brand, right? So you'll see ones, especially in retail, everything's very like there's a lot of harmony between all those colors, right? Everything's working super well together, and it's for that reason. They want you to have that consistent experience, or if you walk into that store that it's all them, right? It's all that same brand, that same feeling. So from that perspective, it definitely secondary colors I think are more than just the meaning of the color, but the overall brand aesthetic is really important. And it's hard for just online brands, but it's funny because there are many elements to your brand that are visual that aren't just your logo, such as the color, such as the fonts that you use, such as even things like the spacing and the sizing of your materials and your fonts, like whether everything's big and bold or whether things are minute and off center. People start to click in with that, right? So they may actually recognize that it is a piece of your brand's content. Like because I went to design school, I obviously hung around with a lot of designers, and we were actually able to recognize each other's styles without knowing that it's their work. So like we would have projects on the wall and we had to critique them, and we would actually be able to identify who the designer was. And so that's a good thing because it means you have your own style and your consistent style. But that's an amazing thing to have as a brand, because people will start to recognize. It's just like Apple. Apple is obviously like the most design focused company, but what is there to their designs, right? It's literally white empty backgrounds with small dark gray text, and that that's an Apple product or an Apple box. Like they almost claimed that as their style because they're one of the biggest companies in the world, right? But you can definitely have visual style. Any other questions?
Does anybody want to ask a question now? John?
Hi, I just had a quick question. Is my camera? Oh, sorry.
You're good, John.
Okay, great. Sorry. Yeah, my question is, and great presentation. Thank you so much for that, all the useful information. My question is, so I have a finance background. I have no marketing kind of knowledge. So let's say I'm trying to, or in the future, look to onboard somebody with potentially that marketing knowledge. What are some of the key things as somebody from my background can do to kind of pick the right person? I don't know if that's even possible from my experience, but yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult. Do you have a business currently or not yet?
I mean, it's a startup. It's a startup. Yeah.
Does your business serve, like, is it B2B? Does it serve other businesses or does it serve customers?
I guess just to introduce it very quickly. So it's a directory for ethical stores and brands. So it's supposed to help consumers kind of break down the barriers to finding something that is sort of sustainable in a very easy way.
Yep. So in that case, John, one of the things that you would look for in the person is, of course, if they're your one go-to person, they do have to be, multi-talented, but it's so important that you don't expect them to be your designer, your social media manager, your content creator, your website developer, your video producer, because obviously you're not going to find that person. And if you have the expectation on them, you're going to both be disappointed, basically, right? So I would look at what your most urgent needs are. And in a startup phase, when they're that new in the startup phase, it's going to be around anything that you can do that helps you get to the next level in terms of sales or outreach, right? So
right.
From that perspective, I would say you should put in the work to work closely with someone to develop your actual brand and messaging. But once that's developed, you can have that person just doing outreach, whether it's emails, whether it's DMs, whether it's social, and they can kind of show their value and learn more about the brand through that process. Right. Whereas if you gave them an open playing field, like, okay, you're the social media manager.
Do your thing.
Yeah, so they might be able to post stuff, but I can guarantee that unless you gave them a brand kit and a style guide and a folder of content, it's going to be hard, right? It's going to be a big uphill battle for them. So,
Okay. So I should have my feet wet in some of my marketing strategy. I already have my social media accounts and do a bit of marketing by myself before even considering to onboard someone, just because of I need to be experienced. I need to know what I'm talking about.
Exactly. You need to almost, because they're not going to be the ones that are going to experiment for you. You kind of have to have the instruction or the direction there first a bit, right?
Yeah.
They'll definitely learn along the way, but that's one of the mistakes I see is like people get an intern and then all of a sudden the intern is the marketing department. It's like, it's not fair. It's not a fair situation, right?
Absolutely. Thank you. Great.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
We have a double question from Sarfraz.
Double.
We launched a website called giftowls.ca. We like our logo as is. However, during the process, we did have a choice to go with a more cutesy logo style. I wonder whether it's advisable to have variations or alternatives of a logo, something akin to NBA basketball uniforms. That's part one.
Got it. So for part one, yeah. So I checked out the site. So one thing that I'll say is you have a product where the logo isn't going to be super present on the product, right? Because I believe that it looks like it's food. So with cakes and desserts and things like that. So if you had a product where the brand itself was extremely present visually on it, I would recommend having a simpler brand, and then you can allow the product, whether it's, if it was clothing or if it was some other kind of material, that would have the character and the personality that would change depending on the product. So you'd have a simpler logo. In this case, the logo actually helps it's a very well fitting logo to your name, and I think that it can work well across all of your products. I would just recommend a version of your logo that doesn't have the color associated with it. So, like for example, if you're trying to sell something at a higher end price point and your prices are not dirt cheap, like they're premium pricing, right? People perceive value differently. Like for example, if it's a lime green logo or a hot pink logo, and it's a sophisticated box of chocolates that's $150, it's going to clash a bit, right? So in that case, someone may expect like a logo that's like embossed in a silver ribbon or something, right? It's the colors do play on the value, right? There's certain colors. That's why McDonald's is like iconically like yellow and red. Those colors make you hungry. They are cheap looking, right? And so anyways, not to say that you shouldn't use pink anywhere, but I think for some of your products, when you are putting this logo on the products, having an all white version or an all gray version, I think would elevate it a little bit. I hope that answers the question. And in the event that you have, let's say, a very premium product, let's say it's you end up getting like a custom box designed, like whether it's like a leather box or a wood crate, I would do that with just the name. You don't have to have the icon at that point for that premium level box. So hopefully that answers the question.
Then the second part of the question says, we're starting out targeting a niche online audience, serving limited locations nearby. We've already received some tough requests. Since it's early on, how flexible should we be in our customer service or helping our brand image promise?
Right. So I think the question there is like, how much should you challenge yourself to take on at the risk of messing up, your reputation by not necessarily being able to deliver, right? So that's a tough one, especially if you are trying to actually grow. I would suggest that you do get a little bit more feedback from your customers and potential customers about things like your price points or your process. What a lot of companies do is they end up having here's our set packages and our set products at these prices. And it's a separate site or a separate form altogether if you want the custom side of it, right? So not to say that this is the same industry, but if you look at one of my Brampton businesses, Tea by Daniel, not my business, but it's called Tea by Daniel. I've worked with Daniel on branding the stuff for his store. He had a store inside Bramley City Center, and he switched online, and he actually changed his aesthetic altogether. He went from what you kind of refer to as the cutesy, more fun, friendly style to the more high-end approach. And so in order to help bridge that gap between these crazy, fun flavors to a more sophisticated palette, he literally changed his look altogether as a company. And he launched something separate called Daniel's Private Collection. So if you're buying something from Daniel's Private Collection, you know that it's going to be that more custom high-end side, right? So the customer right away, they know the difference. So I think that that would probably be something where you can test those different niches, because they're going to be at different price points, and maybe a different name or a different brand as well. But yeah, check out Tea by Daniel. I'll put the link in there.
I have a question that was asked during the reception portion. How can a small business go from their original niche target audience to a worldwide audience? And what are kind of some of the changes that the branding might experience moving from point A to point B?
So part of that is looking, when you do create your brand, the reason that I talk about going through the whole process, that whole iceberg situation, is like the more depth you have, the easier it will be to make these decisions when you are ready to scale, right? So usually what happens, and I don't know if the question is from someone who has like a physical product or a service or what that is, but usually what happens if it's a physical product is you do have to switch into different gears, into like mass production as opposed to, you know, the handcrafted packaging. So how do you design your packaging where it actually makes sense from a price point to be able to even offer that type of packaging, right? Sometimes you have to literally reinvent your product. The other aspect is I've seen small businesses, like really small business, that have products that get a really big partner, and the partner, such as the store, comes back to them and says, actually, we need your packaging to look like this, and we actually need you to change your brand because we have something similar here. And so if it happens too early on, you can actually get your brand taken away from you and really adjusted too much. That's why a lot of people go direct to consumer first. They launch on Shopify, they do markets, they do things like that, right? And then if it's a service-based brand or a software, sometimes when you do scale, you end up becoming, your branding becomes more niche to who ends up starting to use your stuff more. So for example, if you started an accounting software and for whatever reason it ended up being used primarily in one industry, you may actually adjust your branding and your messaging to that industry. Not to say that other people can't use it, but you're speaking to that industry. And if you say we're the accounting system for people in the construction and home and development industry, those people are going to flock to that software because they feel like it's for them, right? You may literally discover that the more clients you get in that industry. So all that to say that you will, like, those factors that happen later down the line can literally send you one direction or the other. If you find yourself in a case where you're being pulled in two completely different directions, you totally have the option to create a sub brand or to have a front-facing brand that's completely separate, that only services that one client, but the back-end operations are the same, right? And that does happen sometimes because of things like competition or the marketing is just so drastic. There's a lot of brands that actually have this right now where you would never know that they have one that's targeted to different genders, but they're the same parent company, but they don't tell you that, right? Because they would, if one thought the other was connected, it would actually dilute the brand, right? Hopefully that answers that question.
We have another question. What are some red flags that show that red flags to show to management that branding that's currently chosen might be too broad or too vague to engage the current customer base?
Yeah, so this is really common with big companies that a lot of times they're big, but they don't really look at where their revenue is coming from, meaning a lot of it could actually be coming from one or two core offerings or core products, and they're afraid to brand their company as that product, or they're afraid to lean into that, right? Because they originally sought out to be every service or every offering. It's changing the brand and changing the messaging is a really big decision, and it usually has to come from the top. They need to see data, and a lot of times that has to be commissioned. So for example, one of my friends does market research. Any decision that a company is looking to make, if he gets hired to do these market research studies and reports, and those actually influence brand decisions. If the data is there that people see your company this way, or people don't actually identify you with this service, then you'll never be the go-to brand for that, right? It's hard to convince within a corporate structure unless you are the person that's like the senior marketing person, or you're a partner or something like that, without having data. One way around it is to do tests. So for example, if you are a brand or a company that does Facebook ads, run several different variations of the same ad with different copy and different visuals, and see. You don't have to see what actually sells, just see what's actually getting people to click. If you're serving the same people those ads and dramatically more clicking your new idea, then that's one way to show that, hey, this should be explored a bit more. So yeah, that's what I would say. Like, do these micro tests that kind of prove it if you can.
Thank you. That was actually my question.
All right. Anonymous.
From a B2B perspective, it's also a little bit challenging because that generic marketing strategy is then being translated into, one person saying, okay, you go out there and talk to a customer and try to get us a contract. And then when it's too broad, you can see that the person you're talking to kind of loses interest. It's so vague that they don't see themselves or their process fit into what.
So exactly. So I was just gonna say they need to be able to see themselves in your process, but more importantly, just by hearing your brand name or visiting your website, they need to be able to identify that, oh yeah, this is something that I need, or like, I understand what this is, right? And if you're too many things, it's so hard for people to make that connection. Even with my agency early on, I told you in the intro that we did, graphic design, social media, video production, web development, photography, all that stuff. And I mean, we were still known for being a design agency, right? Some of our clients, even years later, knew us as a video agency, because guess what? We worked with them on video projects, and in their mind, we're a video agency, right? So when they see that logo, they think of a video agency. So you really have to work hard to change the narrative, because even your existing clients don't know that, never mind the public, right? So it just shows you how obvious your branding sometimes really has to be, right? And that's where having like naming your products or naming your offerings, and people know what they are just by the name of it. The parent brand isn't as important, but if they identify that sub brand or that product name, then it can stick as well, right? Similar to Sean, how it was like, company name by Sean. That means that Sean can also open a different company that's also by Sean O'Keefe, right? And people may see that connection, but they're different brands altogether, right? All right.
Perfect. I have 2 more questions off here, but if anybody else wants to ask a question right now, feel free, because we're coming up to 6:30 very soon.
I actually did have another
Go right
thought,
ahead.
like promoting the conference and other comments that have come up. Everybody just continues to struggle with low engagement rates, especially, I mean, even where somebody, let's say, is taking the first step to become a member, and then companies are paying for things like Slack channels. The people are, you know, members, but they're still not engaging, and you spend time creating the content. What do you normally tell people for that?
Yeah, would this be like, so I guess part of the challenge is, what is the point, like what is the tipping point where you have scale where it makes sense to pour in resources to people who are only the clients, right? So the biggest challenge is to focus on getting as many people through the door with whatever free value that you can, so that you have a bigger funnel, right? It's really just a sales funnel. So
Going to be like,
yeah, so it's like if you're for example, one of the a big conference I had marketed, they had built up their mailing list. You know, they added 3,000 or 4,000 people each event they had, but they only needed to sell 500 tickets per event, right? And so they knew that the next time they announce an event, if 90% of the people aren't interested in that keynote speaker, that's fine, because they built kind of a big enough they built a big enough following that they only need a small percentage that's the buyer. And if you look, I'm sure you've seen, but there are some crazy business models out there where literally they do so much for free. Like even Buffer, Shopify employs like 30 or 40 people in-house just creating free video courses, free articles for people who aren't even Shopify customers, because they know that a percentage of the people who find those articles and videos valuable may become a Shopify customer and pay them $20 a month, but maybe they become a Shopify enterprise customer and pay them $10,000 a month, right? So it's like they have reached that crazy scale where they know that the amount of stuff that they have to put out just to get a small fraction of the people, you know, that's sometimes where it is. So I would focus on putting out as much free value as you can, as long as you're able to capture people with an email. Otherwise, it's not worth it, right? But you still need to actually get them somewhere, right? And then you build that pool that you can sell to, right?
Perfect. I think we have time for one more question before we start wrapping up. Does anybody have any questions? Otherwise, I'll ask from the pool.
What's this secret pool of questions you have?
It's from the Eventbrite.
Oh, okay.
People asking questions. That's how I knew Zara's question before.
Got it.
I have a question. What like have you had clients who have who bailed on their original logo and branding ideas early on? And can you sort of share the successes or the pitfalls with that?
I did have one client who, she was an individual consultant, and she went a year or so. So we did the branding for her personal brand. She had an icon with it. It wasn't just the name, right? Color scheme and all that, but it was just under her name. And then after a year, she came back and said that she wanted a brand, because one, she did find herself collaborating with other consultants. But the second thing was that the companies, these were like large foundations and funds and stuff, they wanted to work with a company. Like they wanted to feel like they were hiring a firm as opposed to just her, the consultant. So she literally came back and we did with one business partner, and we redid the entire branding, name, logo, everything from scratch. And she's kept that for, it's been almost maybe 4 or 5 years now. So that continued to work for her. I'm just trying to think of from a personal brand standpoint, but we have had clients that have approached us to do their personal brand in addition to their business, right? Like they already have an established business. They want the personal brand so they can get speaking gigs or they're launching a book or whatever. And they do leverage both. I haven't had a situation where it was like such a complete miss that they had to, redo it. But maybe I wouldn't know about it because they just disappeared, right? But normally people do come back to us for other deliverables in the future. Like they're ready in year 1, they're ready. Year 2, they're ready for a video, right? Year 3, they're ready for a new website at that point. And that does happen. So it's kind of cool to see how it evolves.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Daniel. Just to kind of wrap up, because we're running to about 6:29, I'm going to post something in the chat. It is a feedback form. We ask that each and every one of you please fill it out. We want to make sure that we're delivering great content to each and every one of you every week, making sure that we're talking about topics and bringing in mentors who are really serving the needs of each one of you who are joining us for these sessions. I'd like to extend an amazing warm thank you to Daniel for facilitating today. Thank you very much. Me personally, I'm thinking of doing some own ideas for a business that I want to start up. So a lot of this was really, really great. Really good stuff. For everybody who is submitting a Mentor Monday feedback form, please do so. After you do so, I will send each of you the contents and some of the stuff for today directly to the emails that you used when you filled out the form. And I want to say thank you and have a wonderful evening to everybody who's joined us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.